Have you ever wondered why some people suddenly disappear in the middle of the forest? Some houses come alive in the middle of the night, and some murders, even the police don't dare to investigate. Isn't it strange? A person goes on a trip, laughs, takes pictures, and a few hours later disappears without a trace. No body, no clues, not even a footprint. There are some places in the world where it seems that the rules of nature don't work. Places where the law of logic is turned off and an invisible force takes control of everything. And the scariest thing of all is that many of these events are recorded in police reports, in witness statements, in recorded voices that even experts have been unable to explain. Sometimes behind a simple wall, a dark secret lives for years. Sometimes a voice comes from the heart of the night that you can't ignore, nor dare to follow. And some cases, even the police have preferred to close it and not talk about it anymore. Because there is a bitter truth. The biggest fears are the ones that are real. And worst of all, sometimes reality is more dangerous than any nightmare. So before you think you're safe, take another look around. Maybe what you think is just a story is right behind you. It all started with a normal weekend. 3 old friends who decided to go camping in a famous forest. Not a scary forest, not a cursed area. A normal place where hundreds of people went every day. The weather was clear. They had full equipment, even GPS and a radio. The first night, they were sitting around the fire and laughing until one of them said, "Did you hear the voice?" At first, they thought it was a joke, but the voice came again. A very quiet whisper, like talking, but not clearly. It was like someone was crying under their breath. One of the kids got up, took a flashlight, and said, "I'm gonna go see what it is." He walked a few steps into the darkness. His flashlight was flickering between the trees, and suddenly the sound stopped. A few seconds of absolute silence. Then, only the sound of the boy's footsteps walking away, farther, farther, until there was no sound anymore. His friends called him. They called him on the radio. Nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed him. No leaves, no screams, not even the sound of falling. The police came. The sniffer dogs came. The tracks only went as far as the middle of the forest. And then they disappeared. No blood, no traces of an animal attack, no struggle. Worst of all, his radio was still on, and on the recorded frequency, there was only one sound, a very quiet breath, as if he was standing behind a microphone, and a muffled whisper, "Come back, it's late." Nobody understood what he meant. Nobody understood who he was talking to, and nobody saw the boy again. The police, desperate, assumed that the boy had run away or had an accident. But 2 nights later, something happened that changed everything. One of the friends woke up in the middle of the night, not from a nightmare, from the cold. The air wasn't cold, but his breath was steaming. The fire was still burning, but there was no heat, as if the heat had been sucked out. He ran out of the tent to say, "Wake up, there's something," but he was cut short, because right there by the fire, wet footprints were seen. It was as if someone had walked from the lake to the camp. The footprints were fresh, sticky. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that it was just a footprint. It meant someone had come, but hadn't left. They called their friends. Again, nothing. But this time, there was something new. A strange smell. Not the smell of a body. Not an animal. The smell of burnt metal. And suddenly, the radio turned on. A rustling sound. Then the voice of the same boy who had been lost. "Kids, help! It's cold here. I can't move." At that moment, they all froze, because the sound wasn't coming from far away in the forest, but from behind them. They grabbed their flashlights. There was no one, but the wireless voice continued. "Why can't you hear me? I'm behind you." Someone screamed. The flashlight fell. The wet footprints dragged into the darkness, as if something was taking them. They ran, but the forest wasn't the same as usual that night. The trees were closer together. The paths that had been open in the morning were now closed. And wherever they went, they would come across the same extinguished fire again, as if the forest was playing with them, or worse, it was hunting them. The friends realized that it was not just a simple disappearance. Something was waiting for them out there. They decided to stay awake until morning. The fire was lit, the radio was on, the shotgun was ready. But half an hour later, the sounds started. First, the sound of footsteps, very quiet, as if someone was carefully circling them. Then the sound of laughter. Not human laughter, not animal laughter, something in between. And suddenly a voice from the trees. "Why didn't you come back? He's cold." They all gasped. The voice was exactly like the voice of their lost friend, but something was wrong with it. It had no emotion, no breath, like a voice that had been imitated. It was here that one of the children said tremblingly, "If this isn't really him, then what is he talking to us about?" No one answered. And that's exactly where I have to tell you something. In 10 minutes, you're going to be surprised. Because what happened in this forest remained hidden for years. The police erased it, the witnesses disappeared, and only one person was left alive to tell the truth. Back to that night. It was around 3 a.m. when the radio came back on. But this time, it wasn't their friend's voice. It was a woman's voice. Very quiet, very cold. "It's your turn." Then the radio went off. At that moment, the wind started, but the strangest wind in the world, not from one direction. From all directions. It was as if the air was boiling. The trees didn't move. but the ground beneath their feet trembled. Someone shouted, "Run!" They started running, but the forest changed its course every time. Whichever way they went, they came to a broken tree with a sign carved into it, X, as if someone had tried this route before them and failed. They were no longer running. They were fighting, with their breaths ragged, their eyes dry with terror. They had only one thing on their minds. This is no ordinary place. One of them said, "If the forest is turning us away, it means it doesn't want us to go." The other replied, in a trembling voice, "Or maybe it wants to take us somewhere special." At that moment, fog covered everything. Not a normal fog. This fog seemed to be alive. It trembled. It changed shape. Sometimes even a whisper came from it. And in that fog, something was seen. A shadow, tall, unnatural hands, head slightly tilted, as if it was looking at them. One screamed, "Run! Run!" But the last one stopped. He stared at the shadow. Then suddenly he said very quietly, "He's our friend. But why doesn't he have a face?" The shadow didn't move. He just raised his hand and pointed to a spot in the forest, and all the trees made noises from the roots, from the wind, from something underground. A scratching sound, the sound of nails dragging on stone, the sound of someone trying to climb up. They ran, aimless, wild, just wanting to get away, until they reached an old wooden hut. The door was open. They went in. They closed the door, gasping, silence, until one of them shone a flashlight on the wall and froze. On the wall were written hundreds of lines. "If you hear his voice, don't cry. If he says your name, don't answer. Don't open the door. He looks like your friend, but he's not." And the last sentence was written in blood. "I'm still here. The forest won't let me go. Please, if you survive, tell the others." The name underneath, the name of the missing boy. The air in the hut was heavy, as if it was dangerous to breathe. Everyone was silent when suddenly something clicked from the ceiling. Not an animal, not a tree branch. It had a rhythm, like a code. Someone whispered, "This sounds like Morse code." At that moment, the radio came on. A recorded police voice. "Investigation team number 3. You didn't reach the location? Why is the signal still there? Answer." But they didn't have the radio. The sound was coming from the ceiling. Someone silently placed a chair under the ceiling, slowly climbed up. He opened the hatch and froze. Up there were the bodies of the previous investigation teams, all in police uniforms, all silent, like statues, and all of them eyeless. Something had gouged out their eyes. Before he could even scream, a hand from the darkness of the ceiling grabbed him and pulled him up. There was only a second to see it. A creature as tall as a human, but bony, stretched skin, empty black eyes, like a dried-up human who was still alive. The door to the roof closed. The others ran outside. They didn't know where they were going. They just ran. But this time the forest wouldn't let them go back to the camp. It took them straight to the lake. The water was completely still. No waves, no reflections. One of the children whispered, "This water seems to be alive." Another said, "No, seems to be waiting." Suddenly, our friend's voice came from under the water. "Help, I'm here. I'm scared. It's so cold." Someone wanted to dive in, but right at that moment, a corpse's hand popped out from under the water. White, stiff, frozen, and on its wrist was the same bracelet that their friend always wore. No, he wasn't alive. So who was talking? The radio voice came on for the last time. "What you saw is just the beginning." Then the sound of laughter. Not one voice, hundreds of voices, and the lake began to boil. That night, only one person survived. And to this day, in the asylum, when they ask him what he saw, he only says one sentence: "They weren't human, but they used to be." And that was just the first story. Everyone thinks ghosts are the scariest thing in the world, but they're wrong. Sometimes the scariest thing that can come to you is a human being. That person has lived with you for years without you realizing it. The next story is about a family who was forced to move from a crowded city apartment to a bigger and cheaper house on the outskirts of the city. The house was old, but clean. It had a yard, trees, and the neighbors were quiet. Everything seemed great. Until the first night. In the middle of the night, the mother of the family thought she heard footsteps. She woke up. Her husband was asleep, and so were the children. She said maybe it was a dream. The second night, again. This time the sound of breathing. From the wall, behind the bed. She put her hand on the wall. It was warm. In the morning, she told her husband, but he laughed. "It's an illusion. The house is old. It makes noises." Days passed, and small things started. The food in the refrigerator was running low. The pantry light was on. One of the rooms was locked, even though they had the key in their hands. Once the daughter of the family said, "Mom, someone came into my room last night, grabbed my ear, told me to be quiet." Everyone thought she was dreaming. Until one night, the father of the family was watching TV when he felt someone behind him. He turned around. There was no one, but the TV remote, which was on the table, still slowly slipped and fell to the floor. There was no wind, no shaking. Someone was watching him. At that moment, he realized something. The scariest houses are not the ones with ghosts, but the ones with someone hiding in them. And he still didn't know that he was about to discover one of the darkest secrets of humanity. A secret that had been buried alive in this house, behind this wall, for years. From here on, the house was no longer home. Everything was normal in the morning, but at night, it was as if the walls came alive. The mother of the family decided not to sleep one night and keep an eye on everything. At exactly 2:46, she heard a rustling sound from the kitchen. She slowly went downstairs. The light was off, but a shadow moved quickly in the corner of the wall. With a pounding heart, she said, "Father, is that you?" There was no answer. She turned on the light. There was no one, but the downstairs cabinet was open, and a spoon was lying in the middle of the floor. It was as if someone was searching for food. The next day, The father of the family put a hidden camera in the kitchen. At night, everyone slept. When they saw the movie in the morning, their bodies froze. At 3:10, the cabinet itself opened, and a thin white hand came out with bony fingers. He slowly picked up a packet of biscuits and pulled it back into the cupboard, meaning someone had access to the kitchen utensils through the wall. It was here that the father said to himself, "Either someone is in the house or something much worse." That night, he decided to stay awake. Everyone was asleep. Silence. At around 2 a.m., a very faint sound came from the wall behind the sofa. Tap, tap. The father picked up the phone and recorded the sound. The tap turned into a whisper. The whisper turned into crying, and the crying turned into laughter. The father approached the wall. He pressed his ear to it, and he heard a very clear voice. "Look up." The father, very slowly, he raised his head. The ceiling was dark, but two white eyes were looking at him through the hole in the ceiling. Motionless, blinded, waiting. The father could not bear it any longer. In the morning, he gathered everyone and said, "There is something in this house, and I have to find out what it is." His wife was scared. "Let's go. Let's get out of here." But the father said, "If we go now, that thing will go to another family. I won't let it." So with tools, he started to open the wall behind the sofa. The plaster was old. It cracked easily. But behind the wall, there was no empty space. It was a tunnel. Dark, narrow, just for crawling. A stench hit their faces. A smell that was a combination of dead mice, humidity, and something like meat. The father crawled inside with a flashlight. The mother said, "Go back! It's dangerous!" But he kept going. The further he went, the more scratches and marks on the walls, as if someone had scratched them with a fingernail. The lines turned into words: help, air, food, pray for me. The father said quietly, "This is written from inside the wall." Does that mean, has someone been here for years? The tunnel twisted and reached a small space, a hidden room underground. And there, the father came across something he had never seen, even in his nightmares. A rotten mattress, tin cans, old clothes, nail clippings. That meant someone had lived here. But that was just the beginning. The father was looking at everything when in the corner of the room, he found a half-finished notebook. The first page read, "Day 1, they locked me up here." Page 2, "Day 193, I don't know what day it is anymore." Third page, "Day 640, I heard a new family has arrived. If I call them, will they save me?" Last page, with a jumbled and wounded line, "Day 812, they called me. They opened the door. I was freed. But now, I am no longer the same person I was." At that moment, a voice came from behind my father, very quietly, very close. "You finally found me." Father froze. He gasped. The flashlight in his hand trembled. The same voice again. "You set me free. Now it's your turn." Father turned, and there he saw it. Not a soul, not a shadow, a human, but broken, dry, bent, like someone who had lived in darkness for years. His skin was chalk white, his hair had fallen out, his nails were long and broken, and his eyes empty. But worst of all was his smile. A smile that showed that he enjoyed this situation. Father stepped back and said in a muffled voice, "Who are you?" The creature tilted its head. "I own this blood. You are guests." Then it attacked Father on all fours with inhuman speed. Father crawled back and ran out of the tunnel. At that moment, the wall closed behind him, as if someone had knocked him down. He screamed in fear, "Run!" Everyone started running towards the exit, but the door was locked. There was a sound of footsteps behind the door. Knock, knock, knock. Mother screamed, "Who's there?" A man's voice, "Calm down, I'm your neighbor, everything is under control." The father said in fear, "Help, someone is in the house." The man behind the door said, "I know, he's always there." Silence. "Father, did you know?" The neighbor said very quietly, "You're not the only one. Many families came before you." Silence. None of them could get out alive. At that moment, a thin hand came out from the wall opposite. It was as if the wall had become skin. Another hand and a face. They were coming out. White face, with no eyes, with a mouth that was open to the ears. He was coming out of the wall, and in a voice that seemed to come from his mouth and the wall at the same time, he said, "Welcome home." Everyone was screaming, banging on the door, looking for a way to escape, but it was as if the house had come to life. The father wanted to break the window, but the glass was as hard as metal. The mother was hugging the child and just crying. At that moment, that thing had half come out of the wall. The sound of its bones moving echoed in the house like ice breaking. The father shouted, "What are you? Why are you doing this?" The creature stopped for a moment. It turned its head slowly and said in a voice that went straight into the mind, "I am here because you forgot about me." "Father, what are you saying?" The creature laughed. "You always come. You use us. You sell us. Then you throw us against the wall, and you say we are crazy. But we are still alive." The father froze. That is, it was not a ghost. This was a victim, a person who has been tortured for years to the point where he has lost his humanity. The creature stepped forward. The child screamed, "Dad, he has no eyes, but he is watching us." At that moment, the father remembered something. Hidden camera. He took out his phone. Everything was being recorded. He said loudly, "If we are going to die, at least the world should know what is going on here." The creature paused for a moment, as if he understood that he was going to be exposed. The sound of his footsteps stopped. Silence. Everyone held their breath, and it is exactly here that I have to tell you something. If up to this point, this story has managed to awaken your curiosity, and you want to know what will happen in the end, then now is the best time to hit the subscribe button. Because what you are going to see in the rest of this story and the next one is not something you can easily ignore. We have just reached the middle of hell, and the deepest part of the story has not yet begun. Well, the second story continues. The father slowly held the camera in front of the creature's face. The flashlight light fell on it. The creature was sensitive to light. Its skin started to smoke. So light was their only weapon. The father shouted, "Turn on the lights!" Everyone ran to the switches. The lights turned on one by one. The creature let out a terrible scream and retreated. It sank into the wall and disappeared. The house became quiet. Only the sound of gasps. But the camera was still on, and in the last frame, before the light was completely full, one thing was clear. It was not alone. Behind it, dozens of other eyes in the wall were watching us. The house was completely dark. There was no more sound, whispering, or laughter. But no one felt safe. The father took his child's hand and said, "We have to go. Now. Whatever happens." The mother tried the door with trembling hands. This time it opened. Without even getting dressed, they ran out of the house. It was still dark. There was a heavy silence. When they reached the street, the neighbor who had been talking behind the door was standing there. The father said angrily, "You knew. Why didn't you help?" The neighbor said with empty, tired eyes. "Help? I've been living in this same house for 12 years. 3 families came before you. None of them survived. The only thing I can do is open the door for you." The father approached him in disbelief. "Why didn't you call the police?" The neighbor laughed, but it was a sad laugh, not a mockery. "Do you think the police don't know? Do you think this house is empty by chance? Do you think the price is too low?" "Father, the neighbor whispered, "this is not just a house. It's an old system, a secret torture chamber. They used to hide people here. Some died. Some didn't die. Those who didn't die were transformed." The mother asked tearfully, "You mean, how many of them are still there?" The neighbor turned his head towards the house. He said quietly, "The walls are full of them." For a moment, everyone was silent. Then, the father said, "We're going. The police, the reporter, whoever, we're going to expose this." The neighbor smiled bitterly. "You think, like everyone else, that the truth saves people. No, the truth scares people. And when people are scared, the people behind this will erase everything." Silence. "Father, so what should we do?" The neighbor said only one sentence: "Run, before it's too late." The family got in the car and drove away, but the camera was still on and recording. And in the last picture, behind the upstairs window, a white face without eyes was chasing them. The car drove away. The house got smaller, but the horror had only just begun, because they didn't know. The next true story, it's not just about a house or a forest anymore. The next story is about an unsolved murder that even the police are afraid of. And worst of all, this one is the most real and darkest of them all. And what is discovered in it questions all our beliefs about death, the soul, and humanity. So don't miss the next video.